The ballroom of Ellesmere House had been built to make ordinary people feel small, and on the night the Duke cast Rosalind Fairfax out of it, it did that work upon her with a will. 100 candles burned in the great chandeliers, throwing gold across the gilt and the long mirrors, and 100 powdered faces turned as one, when Adrian, Duke of Ellesmere, crossed the polished floor with an empty blue velvet jewel case, held out before him like an accusation already spoken aloud. "You will tell these people where they have gone," he said. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "The Ellesmere sapphires. My aunt's sapphires that she wore before half the crowned heads of Europe. They are gone from this case, and you are the only soul beneath this roof who carried the key to it. Tell them, Miss Fairfax. Tell them what you have done." Rosalind stood very straight in her plain grey gown among all the silks and the diamonds, and she did not weep, though her heart had gone to water in her breast. She looked at the man she had once believed to be better than his own pride. "I have done nothing," she said, "that I need be ashamed to speak aloud." "Then speak it." "The stones in that case were paste," she said, "clear enough to carry, before ever I was accused of taking anything. I would stake my life upon it, for I saw them with my own eyes, and I know glass from sapphire as I know my own name. Someone drew out the true stones and left cold paste in their place. It was not I." A murmur went round the great room like wind moving through standing wheat. The Duke's face did not alter, but something behind his eyes shut like a door. He was too proud to be told, before every person he had invited into his house, that he had been robbed under his own roof by someone he trusted. And it was easier, so much easier, to lay the theft at the feet of a penniless companion than at the feet of his own blood. "Glass," he repeated, with a contempt that made the nearest guests flinch on her behalf. "You would stand in my mother's ballroom and call the Ellesmere sapphires glass. Get out of my house." And the terrible thing, the thing Rosalind would remember on every cold night of the long months that followed, was how quietly it was all done. No constable, no shouting, only a proud man's outstretched arm, and an open door, and a gentlewoman put out into the dark with her character in ruins, and no proof of anything except that she had displeased a duke. He would remember it too. That was the part he did not yet know. A season would turn, and the truth would walk back into that same bright ballroom on its own 2 feet, and the Duke of Ellesmere would stand exactly where Rosalind Fairfax stood now, accused before his equals, stripped of every certainty, with nothing left to offer but the one coin his pride had never once permitted him to spend. He would learn who had truly taken the sapphires, and when he learned it, he would have to beg. To understand how a gentlewoman came to be turned out of Ellesmere House after dark, with no character and no protector, one must go back a little to quieter years, before grief had sharpened the Duke's pride into cruelty, and before his cousin's debts had grown teeth. Rosalind Fairfax had not been bred to fetch and carry. Her father had been a dealer in fine gems, a quiet and careful man who kept a discreet shop off a respectable street and supplied half the great houses of the county with the stones that made their heirlooms famous. Rosalind had grown up at his elbow, at the felt-topped table where the lamps burned bright as noon, learning to tell a true sapphire from a clever forgery by the way it drank the light and gave it back again, changed. "A true stone has a fire in its heart," her father used to tell her, turning a gem slowly beneath the lamp so the blue woke and moved. Paste has only a shine. Any fool can polish glass until it shines, but fire you cannot counterfeit. A stone is born with it, or it is not, and no man alive can put it there after. She had thought it only a lesson in gems. She did not know she was being taught to tell a true thing from a false one, and that the lesson would one day cost her everything before it gave it all back. Her father died owing more than his stock could cover, a run of bad debts, a partner who decamped in the night, a slow illness that ate the last of the money before it took him. Rosalind, at 23, found herself genteel, accomplished, well-mannered, and very nearly destitute. There was no place in the ordered world for such a woman, but the narrow one that swallowed so many of her kind. She must make herself useful and agreeable in another woman's house, and be grateful for the shelter, and expect nothing beyond it. She was fortunate in her mistress at the least. Lady Ophelia, the Duke's great-aunt, and the last of the elder generation of the family, was a silver-haired dowager with sharp, kind eyes, and a tongue that could take the varnish off a lord at 10 paces, and she took to Rosalind at once. "You do not simper," the old woman said on the first evening, examining her over a glass of ratafia, "and you are not afraid of me, which the last 3 all were. You will do." For 4 years Rosalind read to her, and quarrelled companionably with her over cards, and dressed the thin silver hair, and sat up through the bad nights when the old heart laboured, and she came to love the sharp old woman as she had loved no one since her father, and to be loved plainly in return. It was Lady Ophelia who owned the sapphires, the Ellsmere parure, a broad collar of them, a pair of drops for the ears, and a great square ring the size of a thumbnail, had come to her as a bride, and never left her keeping, and she wore them still on great occasions with a defiant, girlish pleasure. "They will go back to the family when I am gone," she told Rosalind once, letting the collar pour cold and blue through her old fingers, "and much good may they do that stiff nephew of mine, who never yet gave anyone anything but his opinion. But while I breathe, they are mine, and I shall wear them to vex the dull." She would let Rosalind clean them, for Rosalind alone in the household knew how, and every time, without fail. Rosalind marked how the great stones woke under the cloth, how the fire moved in their hearts the way her father had taught her true stones must. She never once thought to be glad of that knowledge. She had no notion yet how much would come to hang upon it. The Duke himself she knew only a little in those years, and did not much like what she knew. Adrian, Duke of Ellsmere, was a tall, dark-haired man with a proud, clean-jawed face, correct in every particular, cold in most. He came to his aunt dutifully but rarely, sat with her the proper half-hour, declined to be teased, and went away again, and Rosalind, a companion, a piece of the furniture in a plain grey gown, he scarcely appeared to see at all. Once, only once, he had come upon her in the library weeping over a letter that told her the last of her father's shop had been sold to strangers, and he had stood a moment in the doorway and then said, not unkindly, "Grief is a private matter, Miss Fairfax. You will forgive me for not intruding upon it," and withdrawn. She had thought then that he mistook coldness for courtesy, and pride for strength, and she had not greatly cared to correct him. She did not dream how thoroughly she would one day teach him the difference. There was another who came more often to Lady Ophelia's door, and made himself far pleasanter there, and that was the Duke's cousin. Mr. Julian Vane was a fashionably dressed man with fair hair and a ready, charming smile, in an elegant bottle green coat, and he was, since the Duke had neither wife nor near heir, the heir presumptive to the whole of Ellesmere. He flattered the old lady, and fetched her novels, and made her laugh, and Lady Ophelia enjoyed him precisely as much as she distrusted him, which was a great deal of both. That one, she told Rosalind, watching his carriage roll away down the drive, would sell his own coat buttons and swear the tailor stole them. Count the spoons when Julian dines, my dear. Count the spoons. Rosalind had laughed. She would remember later that the old woman had never once been wrong about a soul in her life. Lady Ophelia died in the spring, quietly, in her sleep, with Rosalind's hand in hers, and with the closing of that one kind pair of eyes, the whole shape of Rosalind's small, safe world fell in. For a companion is only ever as safe as the life she attends, and when that life is spent, she is a candle end to be swept up and thrown out with the rest of the morning. Rosalind knew it, and did not flinch from it. She had loved the old woman for herself, and not for the shelter, and she grieved her honestly. But she had also, of late, a colder thing to grieve. In the last weeks, as she cleaned the sapphires by the sick-bed one evening for the pleasure it gave her mistress to see them, Rosalind had felt her hands go still upon the great collar. She had turned it beneath the candle, and turned it again, cold, suddenly to the roots of her hair. The stones did not wake. There was a shine on them, a fine cold shine, but the fire was gone out of their hearts, every one. She knew paste as she knew her own face in the glass, and she was holding, in that quiet sick-room, an Ellesmere parure that was nothing now but cleverly cut glass in the old settings. She said nothing to the dying woman. There was no mercy in it, and no time, but she understood, kneeling there with the cold false stones in her lap, exactly what she was looking at. Someone with access to that jewel case, and months of leisure, and a jeweler's discreet acquaintance, had drawn out the true Ellesmere sapphires one by one, and set paste in their place, betting that no eye in the household was sharp enough to know, and there was only one member of that household who was forever short of money, forever charming, and forever lately at Lady Ophelia's door. Count the spoons, my dear. She meant to tell the Duke. That was her whole intention. And it was an honest one, and it undid her. On the morning after the funeral, with the will not yet read, and the house full of black crape, and the heir presumptive very much in evidence, Rosalind went to the Duke, where he sat cold and correct in his aunt's study. And she told him plainly what she had found. The sapphires in the case were paste. The true stones were gone, and had been gone some while, and she believed. She chose her words with great care, for they were grave, that whoever had done it must be someone with long and easy access to the old lady's rooms. She had expected shock. She had expected anger, even, and was braced for it. She had not expected the thing she got, which was cold, immediate, bottomless suspicion turned full upon herself. You, the Duke said slowly, setting down his pen, who alone in this house are permitted to handle those jewels? You, who alone keep the key to that case? You come to me the day after my aunt is in the ground to tell me the sapphires are false, and to point me so very helpfully at some other undefined thief. He rose. He was very tall, and the grief in him had turned to something hard and glittering that wanted an object, and here was one, conveniently to hand, in a plain grey gown. How would a companion come to know paste from sapphire at a glance, Miss Fairfax, unless she had made it her particular study? Unless she had, perhaps, arranged the exchange herself and grown clever at it. The floor seemed to tilt under her. "My father was a gem dealer," she said. "I learned it at his table as other women learn to net a purse. I came to you because you ought to know, because it is being done to your family. It is being done," said a smooth voice from the doorway, "and I fear we are looking at the one who did it." Julian Vane came into the study with an expression of the deepest, most sorrowful reluctance, and he did it beautifully. He had suspected, he said, for some little while, a delicacy he had kept to himself out of respect for his poor aunt. Miss Fairfax's circumstances were so very straitened, were they not? A father dead a bankrupt, not a penny of her own, and such expensive knowledge in her clever head. He had seen her, he said, and here he lowered his eyes, as a man does who hates to strike. He had seen her more than once at the jewel case alone. He had thought nothing of it at the time. Now, of course, he spread his hands. Now one saw the whole sad shape of the thing. It was masterly. It was a lie built entirely of true bricks. She was poor. She was learned in gems. She did handle the case alone, mortared together into a shape that damned her utterly, and there was not one plank of it she could tear away without seeming to protest too much. She saw, watching the Duke's face close and harden, that she had walked into the study to accuse the guilty man, and had contrived instead to hand him her own head. The true thief stood at the Duke's shoulder, wearing sorrow like a well-cut coat, and pointed, and the proud man believed him, because the proud man wished to. They did not even trouble to keep it private. Perhaps the Duke, humiliated in his own heart, needed it public, needed the theft to be a thing done to him by an outsider and answered before witnesses, rather than a rot he had failed to see grow in his own family. That very evening the house was full, a great morning dinner and reception long arranged, that the Duke would not put off. And there in the blaze of the ballroom before every consequence in the county, with Julian Vane hovering grave and helpful at his side, the Duke of Ellsmere held out an empty blue velvet case and cast his aunt's companion out into the night for a thief. She walked. There was nothing else to do. She would not give the watching room the satisfaction of tears, nor Julian Vane the pleasure of her collapse. She gathered the shreds of herself, and she walked the length of that gold and glittering floor with her chin level and her step even. Out through the great doors, down the steps, and into the cold and the dark, where a servant had already set her one small box upon the gravel, like a thing thrown out, and behind her the doors closed, and the music, after a decent pause, took up again. The weeks that came after were the hardest of Rosalind's life, harder than her father's death, for that at least had left her honor whole. A companion turned off without a character is a ruined thing. There is no next house, no letter of recommendation, no kind word from the last mistress, for the last mistress is in her grave, and the master has named you a thief before the world. Doors that had been civil closed. An agency that had placed 100 gentlewomen looked at her over its spectacles and regretted, coldly, that it could do nothing. She took a cheap room in a poor street and lived on the little she had saved and the sale of her few good things, and she wrote letters that were not answered, and she felt her name rotting quietly all around her like fruit left in the wet. But her father had left her two things that could not be taken. The first was that hard, exact eye for a true stone, and the second was a spine that would not bend, not for a duke, not for ruin, not for the whole cold weight of a world that had decided against her. She did not break. On the worst evening of all, sitting by a mean little fire with her last candle guttering, she found herself turning her father's old jeweler's glass over and over in her fingers, and she thought, with a sudden cold steadiness that surprised her, I know one true thing that no one else in this story knows. I know those sapphires are out there in the world, real and findable, and that a man who swaps true stones for paste does it to raise money, which means he sold them or pawned them, and a sold thing leaves a trail. She did not yet see the whole road, but she had found in the dark the first paving stone of it, and she set her foot upon it. She was not, as it happened, entirely without a friend. Mrs. Danforth, the housekeeper at Ellsmere House, a broad, upright woman in a dark stuff gown with a great ring of keys at her waist, had served Lady Ophelia 30 years and loved her, and had watched the whole ugly business with a mounting private fury she had been too well trained to show. She had seen more in 30 years of keeping a great house than anyone supposed. She had seen Mr. Julian Vane come and go by the garden door at odd hours. She had seen a jeweler's man once, whom no one had sent for, and she had witnessed, with her own hand set to the paper as a servant sometimes is, the signing of a certain document in Lady Ophelia's last month that no one had since seen or spoken of. Mrs. Danforth was a cautious woman, and a frightened one, for a housekeeper who crosses the heir presumptive may find herself as characterless as the companion. But she was not a coward. She found out Rosalind's poor lodging, and came to it one evening heavily veiled, and sat on the edge of the single hard chair, and told her 3 things that changed everything. The first was that there had been a will made, a proper new will, with a codicil, in Lady Ophelia's last weeks, and that she, Danforth, had witnessed it, and that it had never been read. Old Mr. Ledbury, the family's solicitor, had drawn it and held it, and since the death, Mr. Vane had been very much about Mr. Ledbury's office, and the reading had been put off, and put off again, on one smooth excuse after another. The second thing was what Mrs. Danforth believed that codicil contained, from a word the old lady had let fall to her, that Lady Ophelia, having no near kin she cared for beyond a stiff nephew already rich, had left the whole of her personal fortune, and the Ellesmere sapphires outright, to the one companion who had loved her for herself, to Rosalind. The third thing was the darkest, and the housekeeper's voice dropped to say it. If that were so, she said, then Mr. Vane had 2 reasons to want Miss Fairfax destroyed and gone, and not merely one. A thief pins his crime on another to save his neck, but a man who has stolen a legacy from its rightful heir, and buried the will that proves it, must also destroy the heir's very name, must make her a creature no court would believe, and no honest person would stand beside, before that will can ever come to light. He did not cast you out only to cover the sapphires, my dear, said Mrs. Danforth. He cast you out to bury you before the will could raise you up. And that is a thing I will not have. Her ladyship would rise from her grave. Rosalind sat a long while in the cold little room after the housekeeper had gone, and something in her that had been merely enduring turned, at last, and began to plan. She was not a fallen companion begging to be believed. She was, if Mrs. Danforth was right, the rightful heir to a fortune, and to the very jewels she had been accused of stealing. And the truth, if it could be dragged into the light, did not merely clear her. It buried Julian Vane. She went first, not to the law but to the pawnbrokers. Here her father's world served her as no drawing-room could. She knew the discreet houses where a gentleman in difficulties turns fine stones into quiet money. She knew how to describe an unmistakable square-cut sapphire ring the size of a thumbnail. She knew the little Freemasonry of the trade, and had a name in it still, her father's name, that opened careful doors. It took her the better part of 2 months, and the last of her money, and more patience than she had known she owned. But the great stones of an old parure are not easily hidden. One by one, in 3 different houses in 2 different towns, she found them, pledged, not sold outright. For a man who means one day to be a duke does not sell the family sapphires past all redeeming. He pawns them against the day his fortunes mend. And every pledge ticket, every entry in every ledger, was signed in the same fair, careless, unmistakable hand. Not hers. His. She did not act at once, though her whole heart burned to. She was cleverer than that now. Ruin had taught her patience. She went to old Mr. Ledbury the solicitor, not as a supplicant, but with a pawnbroker's sworn copy in her reticule, and Mrs. Danforth's willingness to testify at her back, and she watched the old lawyer's face change, as he understood that the thing was going to come out, whether he willed it or no, and that a man of law found sheltering a suppressed will, and a thief would hang beside him. Miss Ledbury, given the choice between his conscience and his ruin, discovered his conscience with great speed. Yes, he admitted, there was a codicil. Yes, it named Miss Fairfax. Yes, Mr. Vane had leaned upon him to delay. He would produce it. He would produce all of it. He was, he said, an old man, and had not slept well since the spring, and would be glad, God help him, to sleep. And so the shape of it was made ready, quietly, stone by stone and paper by paper, through the long months, while the county forgot Rosalind Fairfax entirely, and the Duke of Ellsmere told himself, on the rare nights he thought of her at all, that he had done a hard thing well. Rosalind rose in those months, as a true stone rises under the cloth, not with noise, but with a gathering fire. Lady Sefton, a formidable old friend of the late Lady Ophelia's, who had never believed a word against the companion she had watched nurse her friend, took Rosalind up the moment the first whisper of the truth reached her, and lent her a countenance no one dared cross, and a house no one dared snub. By the time the will was ready to be read, the penniless, disgraced companion had become, very quietly, a woman with a great fortune coming to her, a powerful patroness at her side, and a case against the Duke's own heir that no drawing-room in the land would be able to resist repeating. The Duke of Ellsmere gave a great ball at the turning of the season, as he did every year, and all the world came to it, because all the world always did. He did not know, how should he have known, that he had built the stage for his own undoing, and lit it with 100 candles, and sent out the invitations in his own hand. For among the cards that went out was one that Lady Sefton had contrived, by means the Duke never afterward untangled, to have extended to her newest and most interesting proche. And so it was that midway through the evening, as the Duke stood receiving beneath the great chandelier where he had once held out an empty case, the doors opened, and the woman he had cast into the night came back into his ballroom on the arm of the most powerful hostess in the county, in a gown of deep sapphire silk, with the recovered Ellsmere sapphires, real and burning blue, and hers about her throat. The room went still the way a room does when it feels, before it understands, that something enormous is happening. The Duke's face, when he saw her, went first blank, then white. And into that silence, clear and unhurried and pitched to carry exactly as far as his own had carried on the night he ruined her, Rosalind Fairfax gave him back his own scene. Transformed, you asked me once, your grace, before all these same people, to tell them where the Ellsmere sapphires had gone. She lifted her chin, and the true stones woke and moved at her throat as paste never could. I have come to tell you. They were pawned, one by one, in 3 houses I can name, for money to cover a gentleman's debts. And paste was set in their place so that no one should know. By the same hand that then pointed at me, that I might be ruined before I could be believed. She drew the papers from Lady Sefton's own footman, who bore them upon a salver, as though they were the crown jewels themselves. Here are the pledge tickets in his hand. Here is the pawnbroker's sworn word. And here, she laid the last upon the salver, is your aunt's true and final will, witnessed by your own housekeeper and drawn by your own solicitor, which your cousin has kept buried these 6 months, because it leaves the sapphires and the whole of Lady Ophelia's fortune to me. He did not only rob your family, your grace, he robbed me of my inheritance and then of my good name, because a thief cannot afford an heir who is believed. You cast out the one person in your house who came to tell you the truth. Ask yourself before all these people whom you kept. Every eye in that blazing room turned, as one, from her to the fair, charming man in the elegant coat, who had gone the color of tallow by the wall. Julian Vane made a sound and a movement toward the door, and found for Lady Sefton had thought of everything, and old Ledbury had brought more than papers, that the way was quietly blocked by 2 very solid men who were not guests. It was over for him in the space of a breath. There is no lie left to a man when his own hand lies open on a salver in the middle of a silent ballroom, and the pawnbroker who took his pledges is waiting in the antechamber to know him again by sight. He did not even bluster long. He was led out through the servants' passage, past the very garden door Mrs. Donforth had watched him use, and out of the story and out of the succession, and into the disgrace that had been meant for another. And the Duke of Ellsmere stood alone in the wreck of his certainty, in the exact spot where he had condemned her, and understood at last, fully and without any mercy for himself, what he had done. He had been robbed by his own blood and had blamed the innocent. He had been brought the truth in an honest hand and had struck that hand down for its pains. He had taken a proud man's shortcut, past the labor of thinking, of listening, of doubting himself even for one moment, and it had led him here, to stand accused of cruelty and folly before every soul whose good opinion he had spent his life guarding. His pride, which he had carried all his days like a shield, had turned in his hand and cut him to the bone. A lesser man might have blustered, or coldly conceded, or fled the room to nurse the wound in private and salvage what dignity he could. The Duke of Ellsmere, whatever his faults, and they had cost a good woman half a year of ruin, was not, at bottom, a coward. And he was done, in that one shattering moment, with the pride that had made him one. He did the thing that undid the last of him, and it was the only thing that could begin to make him worth anything at all. Before the whole silent staring room, the Duke of Ellsmere walked to Rosalind Fairfax, and he stopped before her, and he did what no one present had ever seen a duke do in his life. He bowed to her, not the shallow, correct inclination of rank to lesser rank, but low and long, the bow of a man laying his pride on the floor at another's feet. And then, so that no one could pretend they had not heard it, he spoke. I was wrong. His voice was not cold now. It shook, and he let it. I was wrong in every particular, and I was wrong in the worst way a man can be. I was wrong because I chose to be, because it was easier to condemn you than to doubt myself. You came to me with the truth, and I called it a lie. You stood in this room and told these people you were innocent, and you were, and I cast you into the dark for it. There is no excuse. I will not insult you by reaching for one. He straightened and looked at her, and every guarded thing in his face was open now and would not be shut again. I have wronged you past any right to be forgiven, but I will spend whatever you will allow me spending it, and more, in the undoing of it, before these people, and in every drawing room where your name was blackened. And for as long as I draw breath, I ruined your good name in this room. I will restore it in this room tonight, and go on restoring it until there is not a house in the county that does not know Rosalind Fairfax was wronged by a proud fool and bore it like a queen. That much I can do whether you ever look on me kindly or not. The rest is yours to give or to withhold. I have forfeited any claim to ask. It was a full and public grovel from the proudest man in the county, and it cost him everything a man like him has to give, and Rosalind, who had walked out of that room 6 months before with nothing, stood now with all the power in it gathered into her own 2 hands, and took her time. She had earned the taking of it. You gave me no hearing, she said at last, quietly. You would not spend 1/2 hour in doubt of yourself to save me 1/2 a year in the dark. That is what pride is, Your Grace. It is the refusal to be, even for a moment, uncertain, and it very nearly destroyed me. She let that stand in the silence, and watched him take the whole weight of it without flinching, which was more than the man of 6 months ago could have done. You say you will restore my name. You can. You will. But you will understand that I am no longer a companion in a grey gown who may be spoken to and disposed of as it suits a great man's temper. I have my own fortune now, and my own name back, and my own 2 feet under me, and I shall keep all 3 whatever else I do. If there is ever to be anything between us but a debt repaid, it will be between equals on my terms in my time, and it will be built on the one thing you never once gave me until tonight, which is the plain respect of being believed. I will not be won. I may perhaps in time be earned. That is the whole of what I offer, and it is a great deal more than you offered me. It is a great deal more than I deserve, said the Duke. I will take it, and be grateful, and try to become a man who has earned it. She inclined her head, not a servant's duck, but the level, measured nod of a woman granting a thing from her own strength, and the watching room let out its held breath, and somewhere near the doors old Mrs. Danforth, keys and all, was weeping into her handkerchief and not caring who saw. He was as good as his word, and better, for the making good of it became the work of his life, and not merely of a season. He cleared her name in that room before the candles guttered, and in every other room after, plainly and without sparing himself, until to speak against Rosalind Fairfax anywhere in the county was to be thought a fool. He saw the true sapphires restored to her hands, hers now by a will no one could any longer bury, and the paste flung into the fire, and the empty blue velvet case that he had once held out like an accusation given back to her, filled with her own true stones. He did not press her, or presume, or imagine that a bow bought a heart. He set himself, with a humility that astonished everyone who had known the old cold Duke, to the slow and unglamorous business of becoming a man worth a proud woman's regard, and he was patient at last, because she had taught him, at ruinous cost, the worth of not being sure. Whether she took him in the end, and she did, but slowly, and on her terms, and after she had made very certain of the man beneath the mended pride, is almost beside the point of the thing. What mattered, what the whole county spoke of for years, was the sight no one there ever forgot, the proudest duke in England, in his own bright ballroom, bowing to the ground before the penniless companion he had cast into the dark, and begging her pardon before them all. He had thrown a true jewel out into the night, and kept the paste, and called it wisdom. And the fire he had failed to see, and could not counterfeit, and did not deserve, came back into that ballroom on its own 2 feet, and burned all the brighter for the dark it had been thrown into, and it was his undoing, and the beginning, at long and humbled last, of the only thing in his life he ever came to be proud of having earned.